In this first lecture on countable and uncountable sets, I will give the definition of what is meant by a countable set and also equipotent sets. Then show that Z, the set of integers, is countably infinite. We will also discuss some characterization of countable sets and finally show that the subset of a countable set, any subset of a countable set is countable. So we have already seen what is the meaning of a finite set or an infinite set, but let me just record here again for completion's sake that a set is a finite set if it is either empty, or when it is non-empty set, then there is a positive integer n, so that we get a bijection from the set of uh, integers 1 to etc till n to the set in question, capital A. So therefore, if capital A has n elements so called, then there will be such a bijection. This we had already discussed in a previous lecture. Any set which does not have this property, that is, if it is neither empty nor a set of the type for which there is such a bijection, is called an infinite set. The purpose of this lecture is to describe the various category of infiniteness in a set. So our definition is, which is looking at this definition, we are just going to extend it, that an infinite set A is called countably infinite or denumerable or enumerable if there is a bijection from the set of positive integers to A. So in a sense, if you recall your set of positive integers, it is the set of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So we want to say that this type of set is a counting set. So therefore, any infinite set which is in 1-1 correspondence with this set of positive integers, we would like to call that countably infinite. In my lecture, I would be using this terminology, countably infinite, but these two terms, denumerable or enumerable, are also used synonymously. Okay. Any set which is either a finite set or a countably infinite set is called a countable set. Any set which is not countable is called an uncountable set. And finally, you see that the question is all of bijections between sets. The definitions are given in using the 1-1 correspondences. So what we do is we give a relation on this collection of all sets, which is called equipotence. So two sets A and B are equipotent if both are empty sets, or if they are not empty sets, then there is a bijection from A to B. Why did I have to include this is the reasoning is purely logical, and recall that when you are talking about mappings from a set to another set, your domain of the mapping and the range of the mapping should both be non-empty. So when I want to say that the sets are A and B are equipotent sets, then if there is a bijection between them, I necessarily mean that A and B are both non-empty. But for our arguments later on, it is necessary if I also include that empty set is equipotent to itself, which is just a trivial statement, but necessary later on, you will see. So we have included that in the definition. Okay, so these are our basic concepts of a countably infinite set, countable set, and an uncountable set, and also the relation equipotence between the collection of all sets. My first example is that the set of integers is countable. So by this, naturally I mean that Z is countably infinite, because we already know that it is an infinite set. So the way I have proved it is by specifically giving a bijection between n and z. So let us look at the map first from n to z, that is the set of positive integers to the set of integers. Uh, Precisely speaking, the map is defined like this, that if n is even, then f of n is equal to n divided by 2, and if n is odd, then f of n is equal to 1 minus n by 2. So let us see what is happening here. This is the real line on which I have plotted the set of positive integers, and this is another copy of the real line where I have plotted the set of all integers. I have not bothered to maintain the same scale or anything like that. So let us look at our definition of f. If you look at 1, 1 is an odd integer. So according to this rule, it should go to 1 minus 1 divided by 2. So this blue arrow tells you where 1 is going. It should go to 0, right? Similarly, if you look at 2, then 2 is an even integer. So it goes to 2 divided by 2. So therefore 2 goes to 1. Again, 3 is an odd integer. So according to this rule, it will go to 1 minus 3 divided by 2. So that is minus 2 divided by 2. So the positive integer 3 is mapped to minus 1 by this map f, and so on. So I have done two more cases. So if you take 4, then 4 is an even integer. So 4 divided by 2, so it should map to 2. And 5 is an odd integer. So 1 minus, it should map to 1 minus 5 divided by 2. So that is minus 4 divided by 2. So 5 will map to minus 2. So I hope you are gathering how this function is behaving. It is sending all odd integers after 1 to the negative integers. 3 is going to minus 1, 5 is going to minus 2. Similarly, 7 would go to minus 3 and so on. And all the even integers from 2 onwards are mapped to the positive integers. So 2 is mapping to 1, 4 is mapping to 2, 6 would map to 3 and so on. And 1 is mapped to 0. So it seems pretty obvious that this should be a bijection, but we will carefully show, write down its inverse and show that it is indeed the inverse. That is, we will compose and show that it is the corresponding identity map on whichever is the suitable set. So I have defined this map from n to z. Now what I do is I define a map from z to n. What is this map defined as? It is when n is greater than 0, then you let gn go to 2n. And when n is less than or equal to 0, you let gn go to 1 minus 2n. So even before explaining this map, you notice that this is just looking at the previous map and writing down its inverse, because here every even integer was going to a positive integer and every odd integer after 1 was going to a negative integer, and 1 was mapping to 0. So we have just reversed our process, and what we have asked is that if I take a positive integer, then it should go to an even integer, and if I take a negative integer, then it should map to a odd positive integer. That is what we are asking for, and 0 should go to 1. So just again, what we have done is we have taken two copies of the real line and we have plotted the integers on the first copy and the set of positive integers on the second copy, and we have not bothered about maintaining the same scale. Then if you notice, this map G is precisely where will it how will it behave, that if you take 0, then 0 will map to 1, because you will get the formula 1 minus 2 into 0, so you will get 1. If you look at any positive integer, then it should go to an odd positive integer. So 1 will map to 2, 2 will map to 4, 3 will map to 6, and so on. And if you take a negative integer, then it should follow the rule 1 minus 2n. So just look at what is happening to minus 1. if you apply that here, you will get 1 minus 2 into minus 1. So you get 1 plus 2. So minus 1 maps to 3, minus 2. Similarly, you plug in the value here in this formula because n is less than 0. So you get 1 minus 2 into minus 2. So minus 2 will map to 5, and similarly minus 3 will map to 7, and so on. You can check from this formula. So it is just the reversal of the process which you did in the for f. You get the map G. So G is an inverse of f. So if you want to do it precisely, you should sit down and compute what is happening to G composed f and also what is happening to f composed G. So f was a mapping from n to z and G is a mapping from z to n. So if G is to be an inverse of f, it should satisfy that f followed by the composition with G should give you the identity on n. So just sit down and write down the uh, formulas which we have already given. So take any even integer, first of all, even positive integer, and then look at what is happening to G composed f of 2m. Then f of 2m is equal to m. That is what we have defined. F of 2m will be equal to m. So you just plug in that, and then so you will get G of m. Now what is G of m? That is just twice m, because m is positive. So therefore you get Gm is equal to 2m. So if you take an positive even integer, then G composed f of 2m is equal to 2m. Similarly, the other cases, so let us just see it quickly. That suppose I take an odd integer 2m plus 1, then you look at what is happening to G composed f of 2m plus 1. Then 2m plus 1 via f will go to minus m. Let us go back again and see. So I have 2m plus 1 here. So I have 1 minus 2m minus 1. So 1 and minus 1 will cancel out. So I'll be left out with minus of 2m divided by 2. So I will get minus of m. So that is what I'm saying, that if I look at G composed f of 2m plus 1, that is just G of minus m. And what is G of minus m? That is 1 minus of minus 2m. Notice, if n is negative, then it should map to 1 minus 2n. So now instead of n you have minus m, so it will go to 1 minus 2 times minus m. So you will get, you see, this minus and minus becomes plus, so it becomes 2m plus 1. So therefore every even integer is mapped to itself and every odd integer is mapped to itself by the composition G composed f. So G composed f is the identity mapping on n. Identity mapping means it takes every element of n to itself. That is what is happening here. So again, you have to look at what is happening to f composed G. So f composed G, if we want to check, you recall you have to first apply G and then apply f. So you have to differentiate the numbers according to the definition given in G, that is for n greater than 0 and n less than or equal to 0. So that is what we have done here. That suppose I take any positive integer first, then f composed G of n is by definition of G. I will not go back. I think by now you have got the hang. So this is just f of 2n. And f of 2n is what? 2n divided by 2. So that is n. So for a positive integer, at least this is happening. Again, if you take a non-positive integer, that is if n is less than or equal to 0, then what is f composed G of n? That is by the definition of G, f of 1 minus 2n, and then you apply the rule for 1 minus 2n. What do you get? 1 minus 2n is odd, so this becomes equal to 1 minus 2n divided by 2. So maybe once again we go back and see, this was the formula. If n is odd, then it is 1 minus n by 2. So there we are, instead of n, now we have 1 minus 2n, so we plug in that here. So we get 1 minus 2n divided by 2. So a very simple arithmetic tells you that this is just 2n by 2. So that is equal to n. So whatever be your integer n, whether it is a positive integer or a non-positive integer, it will map to itself by the map f compose g. So f compose g is going to be the identity mapping on z. So therefore, what have you got? You had this map from n to z, which was f, and from z to n you had the map g, and you have shown that g composed f as well as f composed g are identity mappings on the corresponding sets. So therefore, by your set theory, which you know, g is the inverse of f, and therefore f is a bijective mapping. So by the definition of countably infinite set, you get that Z is a countably infinite set, so it is countable. This is a very interesting result for a student to see for the first time, because if you naively think about it, then the set of integers has at least double the elements of the set of positive integers, including another element called 0. So it is very surprising that even though you have uh, so-called double the elements, you think that you have double the elements, you in fact don't have, because there is a 1-1 correspondence between n and z. So we will be seeing some more interesting examples in later lectures. So for the time being, after this example, what we will do is we will discuss some results. This is one of the crucial results, which says that if you look at subsets of n, then they are bound to be countable sets. That means they will be either a finite set or a countably infinite set. So suppose I take any subset capital X of the set of positive integers, then if it is finite, then automatically it is a countable set by definition. So there nothing has to be done. Now suppose it is an infinite set, then I want to say that X is bound to be countably infinite. So for that, I have to define a bijective mapping from the set of positive integers to X. So this we will do by induction. How? You start, so I'm going to call that map H. So H from the set of positive integers to X we will define via induction. Okay, so if X is infinite, which we have assumed, X is at least non-empty. So it is a non-empty subset of the set of positive integers. So it has a least element by well-ordering principle. So what you do is you send H1 to be equal to the least element of X. Very good. So suppose you have defined H1, H2, etc. till Hm minus 1. Then how will you define Hm? You just look at the set x minus h1, h2, etc. hm minus 1. So in the first stage, you just look at x minus h1, for example. So this set is a finite set and x is an infinite set. So x minus this h1, h2, etc. hm minus 1 is going to be non-empty. So again, it is a non-empty subset of the set of positive integers. So by well-ordering principle, it will have a least element. So what is your definition of Hm? It will be the least element of x minus h1, h2, etc. hm minus 1. Recall what is the meaning of minus in the case of sets. X minus h1, h2, etc. hm minus 1 means all the elements in X which are not equal to this. So what have you done? You first defined h1 to be the least element of X. Then you define h2 to be the least element of X minus h1. That is, you leave out h1 from the set capital X. You are still left with an infinite set. You look at the least element of that, call it h2. Now what you do is that from the set capital X, you leave out the elements h1 and h2. Then since X was an infinite set, you are still left with an infinite set. Look at the least element of the set X minus these two elements h1 and h2. That least element you call h3, and so on. So that so on is the principle proof by induction. We have already seen this type of proof, so I hope you are able to understand. So the way we have constructed this little h, this mapping from n to x, it is clear that it is well defined. There is no question of sending two elements to the same thing. You are defining h1 first, and depending on that you are defining h2, then depending on that you are defining h3, and the way you are defining hm will not collapse into any of the previous ones for at any stage m. So therefore h is clear, well defined. Okay, now we want to say that H is actually a bijective mapping. So that needs a little bit of more hard work. So let us do it. First of all, you take any two positive integers m and n. Then you know that one of them has to be less than the other, or they will be equal. So we don't want equal elements because we wish to show that little h, that mapping is injective. So we take two positive integers which are unequal, then one of them is less than the other. Suppose m and n are such positive integers and m is less than n. Then what can you say about Hn? Hn by definition is the least element of the set x minus h1, h2, etc. hn minus 1. So from the set capital X, you have left out these elements h1, h2, etc. hn minus 1, and whatever is the left out thing, the least element of that is hn by definition. And what is hm? Hm is one of these elements h1, h2, etc. hn minus 1, because m is less than n. So m has to be one of the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. n minus 1. So hm belongs to this set, and if you look at the complement of this in capital X, hn is the least element of that. So obviously hn cannot be equal to hm. So if you take two distinct elements of the set of positive integers, the value of hm and hn have to be different. They are going to map to different elements of the set capital X. Therefore, h is injective. So this is the first part. Now what do you have to show? You have to show that h is also surjective. So let us do that. So what is the meaning of surjectivity? You have to take an element of capital X. You have to show that there is a positive integer which will map to this particular element k. So that is what I have called this element. So k is some element in capital X. Now h is injective, and 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. till k is a finite set. So if I look at h of n, h is injective means every element of uh, n, that is every positive integer, is going to a different element of x. So h of n also has to be an infinite set. So since h of n, that is the image of the set of positive integers under the mapping h, this is a subset of capital X. So this is an infinite set, so it cannot be a subset of 1, 2, etc. k. So therefore, there is at least one positive integer n, so that hn will not be one of these numbers 1, 2, etc. k. So it has to be greater than k. Okay. So there is at least one n so that hn is greater than k. Look at the collection of all positive integers n such that hn is greater than k. Then that is a non-empty proper subset of the set of natural numbers. Hence it has a least element. So you will be able to get an m which is the smallest positive integer such that hm is greater than equal to k. Hopefully this is all right. Let me just repeat once more. First of all, you will be able to get a n positive integer so that hn is greater than k. So if you write down the set of all positive integers n so that hn is greater than k, that set is a subset of the set of natural numbers, and it is non-empty because there is such a n. Hence, it will have a least element. let that least element be m. Then m will be such that hm is greater than equal to k. So why will I get greater than equal to k? What you do is the set which you write down, you say that let that set be the set of all natural numbers so that hn is greater than equal to k. So even that set is non-empty because n belongs to the set, and hence you will get a least element like this. Very good. So there is a least positive integer, smallest positive integer m, so that hm is greater than equal to k. What does that mean? That means that h1, h2, etc., hm minus 1, they are all going to be less than k. So that means what? If you look at the set h1, h2, etc., hm minus 1, k does not belong to that set. So if you look at capital X minus h1, h2, etc., hm minus 1, k will belong to that. And what is hm? hm is the least element of x minus the set h1, h2, etc., hm minus 1. So what have you got? You have got that k is an element of a capital X minus the set h1, h2, etc., hm minus 1, and we know that hm is the least element of capital X minus the set h1, h2, etc., hm minus 1. Therefore, by the definition of hm, you get that hm is less than or equal to k. So you already had that hm was greater than equal to k, and now you also have that hm is less than or equal to k. These two statements are possible only if hm is equal to k. So given any k in x by some very subtle arguments, you have shown that k will be in the image of h. Therefore, h is surjective. You already saw that h was injective. Hence, h is a bijection. H was a mapping from the set of positive integers to x. So you have got that x is countably infinite. So this is a very, very crucial result, that if you take any subset of the set of positive integers, then it has to be countable. Okay. So using this result, we will give two characterizations of countable sets. The first one is that we are leaving out the empty set from here, because the characterization is going to depend on mappings defined on the set. So we do not want empty set here. So suppose I have a non-empty set. Then I will say that A is a countable set if and only if I can find an injective mapping from A to N. This is the first result. So how are you going to prove this? We have an if and only if thing here. So that means I have to show that it is both ways true. So first of all, what you do is you just assume that your set is countable and show that in that case an injective mapping from A to N is necessary. Okay, so if you assume that A is countable, that has two cases. First of all, A will be finite, and the second one will be that A is countably infinite. Remember that this is the blanket assumption that A is non-empty. Okay, so if A is a finite set, then by definition, I have a bijective mapping G from A to 1, 2, etc. n for some positive integer n. Remember, in the definition I had written in the I had taken the domain to be 1 to n and the range to be A. But since it is a bijective mapping, once you have a bijective mapping from 1 to n to A, that means that there is a bijective mapping from A to this set also. So that is what I am writing here, because it will be useful for writing down the composition. So I have a bijective mapping G from A to some such set 1, 2, etc. n for some n positive integer, because it is a finite set. Again, there is an injective mapping from the set of these elements 1, 2, etc. n to the set of positive integers. So there are several injective mappings. The injective mapping which I'm going to mention here is called the inclusion map. So what does that mean? That inclusion means comes from the word include. So 1, 2, etc. n is a subset of n. We know that. So inclusion map is doing what? It is just describing how this is included in the set. So it is just given by the mapping h of j is equal to j. So 1 goes to 1, 2 goes to 2, etc. n goes to n. So obviously this is an injective mapping. Now take the composition. So G is a bijective mapping from A to this set 1, 2, etc. n. So in particular it is an injective mapping from A to 1, 2, etc. n, and H is an injective mapping, the inclusion map from 1 to etc. n to the set of positive integers. So the composition will again be an injective mapping from A to the set of positive integers. So if you have a finite set, then you will be able to get an injective mapping from A to n. Notice that this is the most natural one, so that is why we have written it here. So we have taken the inclusion map, but it was possible to define an injective mapping from 1 to etc. n to the set of positive integers in many ways. So, and also this choice of G is also not unique. So you can get many bijective mappings from the set of set capital A to the set of integers 1, 2, etc. n. So therefore, when we are saying that there is an injective mapping, we are in no way claiming that you will be able to get a unique injective mapping or anything like that. All you are saying that if you have a countable set, then there is an injective mapping, some injective mapping. There may be several. Please keep this in mind. Okay, so we have just proved one part. The second part is in fact easier, that if you take a countably infinite set, then by definition there is a bijective mapping from the set capital A to the set of positive integers. So this bijective mapping is in particular an injective mapping. So if you have a countably infinite set, you do get an injective mapping from the set to the set of positive integers. So one conclusion you have proved here, that if A is a countable set, then you will be able to get an injective mapping from the set to the set of positive integers. Now we have to prove the converse, which says that if I have an injective mapping from A to n, then capital A has to be a countable set. So let us assume that one injective mapping, which we are getting at least one mapping, is little f. So little f from capital A to the set of positive integers, suppose it is an injective map. If A is a finite set, then it is automatically countable, so we don't have to worry about it. Next, you assume that A is an infinite set. So I have an injective mapping from A to the set of positive integers. So therefore, A is in 1-1 correspondence with FA. That is, instead of looking at the range as the whole of the set of integers, if you just look at the image of F, so that is FA, then you actually get a bijective mapping from A to FA. So therefore, the other term for that is that you get a 1-1 correspondence between A and FA. So obviously, FA will also have to be infinite. So FA is an infinite subset of natural numbers. So therefore, it has to be countably infinite. We have already seen this. Since it is countably infinite, there is a mapping, bijective mapping from FA to N. What is the nature of that map? What is the definition? We cannot obviously say, because we do not know what FA looks like, but at least we can claim that we will be able to get a bijective mapping from the countably infinite set FA to the set of positive integers. So now notice what you are doing is that from A to FA you have a bijective mapping, which is little f, and from FA to N you have a bijective mapping G. So from A to N you get this composition G composed F, which will be bijective, right? So when you are thinking of this composition, you are going via the image of F. You are not going via this. So from A to FA, you are going via the bijective map little f. It is bijective now because you have restricted your range to the image of F, and you also are you have a bijective mapping from FA to N. So the composition of two bijective maps is bijective. Hence you got a bijective mapping from the infinite set A to the set of positive integers. So by definition, capital A is countably infinite. So this is a very interesting characterization of non-empty countable sets. That is, it must have an injective mapping from itself to the set of positive integers. This also gives you another characterization which says that if you have a non-empty set, then it is countable if and only if you are able to write down a surjective mapping from the set of integers, positive integers, to that set A. Again, I want to stress this fact that this surjective mapping, you are just assuring by this result that you will be able to get a surjective mapping. You are not saying that the surjective mapping which you get has to be unique, or uh, that is not the assertion. Okay, so there can be several surjective maps from N to A. All you are saying is that a set is countable if and only if you can get a surjective map. So again, first you assume that A is a countable set, show that there is a surjective map, and then do the converse of this result. So if A is countable, again there are two cases. One is that it could be finite, and the other is that it could be countably infinite. Remember, the blanket assumption is that A is non-empty. Okay, so if A is a finite set, again we repeat the same argument that there is a bijective mapping. Now, for my convenience, I have written it this way. It doesn't really matter what you had written, whether you take G or G inverse. For the composition, I would like to start from 1 to n. So therefore, I have written it like this, that since capital A is a finite non-empty set, there is a positive integer n and a bijection from the set containing 1, 2, etc. n to capital A. This mapping you are calling little g. Also, there is a surjective mapping from n to the set of integers between 1 and n, 1, 2, etc. n. How is that mapping defined? There can be several maps. So the map which I have chosen is that you just look at 1, 1 goes to 1, 2 goes to 2, etc. till n goes to n. Now after n, from n plus 1 onwards, you send every positive integer to n. So see, I have made a choice here. You could have instead sent all these positive integers n plus 1 onwards to some other number, say 1 or 2 or anything in this range. So there is a choice here, and the one which we have chosen is this. It is immaterial what we take. So 1 goes to 1, 2 goes to 2, etc. n goes to n. All you have to be careful is that the image should be one of the integers between 1 and n, because that is the range. And after n, I have sent everything to n. So I have a mapping like this. Clearly this is a surjective mapping. Inverse image of any element in the range is non-empty. It is clear. So now you look at the composition. So from n to this, you have a surjective mapping, and from this set 1 to n to A, you have a bijective map. So in particular, you have a surjective map. So you have got a surjective mapping G composed H from the set of positive integers to the set capital A. Therefore, if A is a non-empty finite set, then you will always be able to get a surjective map from the set of positive integers to A. For countably infinite sets, the proof is simpler, because by definition of countable countably infiniteness, the set is countably infinite if there is a bijective mapping from the set of positive integers to A. So in particular, there is a surjective mapping from the set of positive integers to A. So you have proved that if you have a non-empty countable set, then you will be always able to get a surjective mapping from the set of positive integers to the set. The converse of this is that if you have a surjective mapping from the set of positive integers to A, then A has to be a countable set. Again, if A is a finite non-empty set, then obviously it is countable. Okay, so the only case which we have to look at carefully is when A is infinite. So you have an infinite set and you have a surjective mapping G, I have called that G, from the set of positive integers to A. Okay, so I will define using this G an injective mapping from A to the set of positive integers. And we have seen this from the previous result that this is sufficient to justify that capital A is countably infinite. So how is that injective mapping defined? You take any element of capital A, so call that little a, then f of A you define to be the least element of G inverse A. So see, your mapping little g from n to A is surjective. So if you take any little a in capital A, G inverse A is going to be non-empty. So it is going to be a non-empty subset of the set of positive integers. So by well ordering principle, it will have a least element. So my definition of this mapping from A to N, which I call by little f, is that FA is equal to the least element of G inverse A. So this is clearly well defined, and we want to claim that it is injective. To show that it is injective, you have to take two different elements of capital A. So suppose you have taken little a and little b. Then if they are different, if A is not equal to B, then look at G inverse A and G inverse B. Look at the set of all positive integers which map to little a by the mapping G, and look at the set of all positive integers which map to little b by the mapping G. So whatever will map to A will not map to B and vice versa. So the pre-image of A and the pre-image of B will intersect in an empty set. That is, the pre-image of A and pre-image of B are disjoint sets. So since they are disjoint, the least element of G inverse A and the least element of G inverse B are bound to be different elements. So FA will not be equal to FB, therefore F is injective. So by what you have what you have shown is that you are able to get an injective mapping from the set capital A to the set of positive integers, and by what you proved just now, the characterization of countable sets using injective mappings, that the existence of this injective mapping justifies that A is countably infinite. So we have got two characterizations which will be very useful uh, in looking at several other results later on. So let me just simply discuss equipotent sets now. It is not going to be very difficult to understand that equipotent sets will either both be countable or both be uncountable, because equipotent means there is a bijective mapping between the sets, and your countability and everything is defined using this bijective maps. So you can expect such a thing. So let us uh, do it carefully, and therefore now you notice why I have included this, that if A and B are both empty sets, then they are countable by definition. So we can ignore this part when both are empty sets. If one of them is empty and the other is non-empty, then there is no question of they being equipotent. So I am not going to bother about that. what we are now looking at is if both A and B are non-empty sets, and suppose that they are equipotent, then I want to say that if A is countable, then B is countable, and if B is countable, then A is countable. So it is a very simple argument. Let us see. Since A and B are non-empty equipotent sets, there is a bijection F from A to B. Right? This is just the definition. Suppose A is countable. If A is countable, then by what we saw just now, there is a surjection from the set of positive integers to A. Let us call that little g. So what do you get? You get a surjection G from the set of positive integers to A and a bijection from A to B, which is F. So the composition G composed F is going to be a surjective mapping from the set of positive integers to the set B. Therefore, by the characterization of countable sets, you get that B is countable. You don't have to bother about whether A is finite or infinite or anything like that. The only thing is that if A is a non-empty set, which we have assumed, and if it is countable, then there is a surjection like this. The converse is similar. Suppose B is countable, then by our characterization again, there is an injective mapping from B to the set of positive integers. So let us call that H. So I have an injective mapping from capital B to N, and I have a bijective mapping from N to A, which I called, where is it? Not from N to A, I'm sorry. I have a bijective mapping from A to B, which I call F. So you go from A to N, all right? So from A to B, I have this bijective mapping F, and which is in particular injective, and then you compose it with the injective mapping little h from B to N. So this composition H composed F is an injective mapping from A to N. So by the characterization we discussed just a few minutes back, what you get is that A is a countable set. So if you have equipotent sets, they are either both countable or both uncountable. Expected thing, but we have just justified it in detail. Okay, so the last result in this lecture is that what we proved for the set of positive integers is in general also true. That means that if you take any countable set X and take a subset of that, say capital Y, then Y has to be a countable set. Subset of a countable set is a countable set. So let us try to prove this. Suppose you have a countable set capital X, then we know that there is an injective mapping little f, say from capital X to the set of positive integers. There is an injective mapping, sorry, you choose one which is called little f. Okay, and now you have Y a subset of X. First of all, if Y is equal to empty, if Y is empty set, then automatically it is countable. If Y is not an empty set, then again you have an inclusion map from Y to X. What is, so how I just described what you mean by inclusion map. So I've called that inclusion map G here. What you are doing is that you are just thinking of Y as a subset of X, and this mapping is describing that this how it is, what is the inclusion. You're just saying, stressing the fact that Y is included in the set X in some sense. So what is the definition of an inclusion map? You just send every element of Y to itself. So G of Y is equal to Y for all Y in capital Y. So this is clearly an injective mapping. It is taking every element of Y to itself. So, and you have this injective mapping F from X to the set of positive integers. So you take the composition F compose G, that is a mapping from capital Y to the set of positive integers. So you have got an injective mapping from the set of from the set capital Y to the set of positive integers. So this characterizes the fact that Y is a non-empty countable set. So in either case, whether it is empty or non-empty, you have shown that capital Y is a countable set, and hence this result is true, which will be very useful to us when we go on to discuss things in the next lecture of this particular topic. The recommended books are the same as we had in the first lecture itself. There I had explained in details how to look at these books. So we will just stop our lecture here.